Well, I had some folks from China on my tour the other night, and we got on the subject of hungry ghost. This is a concept I'm familiar with because I've dabbled in Taoism over the years. And when the Chinese talk about hungry ghost, they're not always speaking of the kind of non corporeal entities that aren't so easy to see. More often, they're talking about the ghost we see every day walking among us. But the average person can't tell that these people are ghosts, or Western culture doesn't think of them as ghosts in the same way that it's understood in East Asia. Because in much of Taoist and Buddhist thought, it's recognized that a living person can be undead, a ghost before their time. In modern Western slang, you might equate this concept to that of Coomers, men caught in the cycle of constant release, chasing fleeting pleasures and dopamine hits, yet never finding lasting fulfillment. Or in short, men who are either addicted to porn or who ejaculate every time they have sex. Unlike in the West, health practices like Taoism and Tantric Yoga have long advised practices to retain this vital energy during intercourse for vitality, long life, and fulfillment. And now, finally, they've shown in Western scientific studies that a man's testosterone levels go down considerably after release. And 7 days later, his testosterone levels jump to 150%. And there's a sort of grogginess, a haze, or lack of energy that most men report after release. The French even call it la petite mort, the little death. Now, in today's Western society, the average man, whether single or in a relationship, is walking around in essentially a perpetual state of la petite mort, or grogginess, as their body is using up resources meant for functions like mental clarity and energy because it has to replace the depleted sperm. But this is ancient knowledge in the East. People think that the emperors of China had these huge harems because of their sexual appetites, like the medieval kings in Western society. But actually, it was more complicated than that. You see, the concubines of the king or emperor actually came with the queen. They were her best friends. They're the ones who basically raised her from a little girl. And they've grown up with her, and they were provided for in order for them to care for her and protect her. And they went to the palace when she was chosen by the king. So what one of their jobs was after the marriage, it was to make the king vital to the queen. They would sleep with the king sometimes, but they would never let him release. And this built up his chi energy all month until the full moon, when there was a special day with the queen. So when the royal or divine lovemaking happened on each full moon, it was for a purpose of either a sort of spiritual ritual for the state, or to empower something sacred, or to make a child a prince or a princess. Now, I realize everybody in the world can't have 300 concubines like a Chinese king, but this concept was practiced by the common people too in ancient times. You hear of the ancient practice of chastity in the West, which is for the same purpose, to build up this sacred vitality, to build up the chi energy, to bring you closer to God. But this comes with certain health and risk, and it doesn't yield the same results as learning to embrace and control your sexuality. See, in the East, it's less about chastity and more about learning to reach ecstatic states without release with your partner. Now, this isn't totally unknown in the West, and you'd be surprised to know that people like Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, and even Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, practiced semen retention in one form or the other in order to cultivate the energy to do their life's work. But now you know, if a Taoist priest or a tantric guru is talking about going to America and they say it's the land of ghosts and demons, well, that's what they're talking about. It isn't necessarily the hauntings in the way that a Westerner might understand it, but something a little bit more subtle that pervades modern civilizations. We'll talk about what they mean by demons in another episode.